Well, this morning, over the years, as I have looked back, I think I've definitely been anxious over some things. We're kicking off a series today on anxious for nothing. Is it even possible? And it is possible. I remember when we got married, Melissa was running late, and her grandfather was a Baptist pastor. He came to me and he said, I prayed that if it wasn't meant to be, that she wouldn't show up. And so I had some anxiousness then. She was a little bit late, and I was like, oh my word, like, this isn't maybe supposed to be, and then she's not going to show up. Anxiousness, knowing that I had to go on this boat ride, which you guys, I've told you up and me and water, I do not like water. I honestly am scared of it. It just terrifies me that I'm going to drown. I cannot swim. I swim like a rock. This was coming up, and honestly, before I left on Wednesday, I was hugging Melissa, and I just grabbed her and held on. I was like, I don't want to do this. I didn't tell her this, but she could tell I didn't want. She prayed for me, and that was great. But you know what? We got there. I had no anxiousness at all. Nothing. There was not a thing. I took 2 Gravol. We had bunks. And I slept throughout the journey. No anxiousness whatsoever. Flying back, of course, I have no anxiousness when I fly. I love flying. It could be like the rockiest thing ever, and I love it. I would rather do acrobatic moves in an airplane than be out on a canoe. That's how I'm wired. I don't know why. But that's just me. That is one of those things that I get anxious about, being in a boat. But, there's times when anxiousness can creep in and really get to you. Over the past few months, there was an episode, I guess, of anxiousness that really got to me, that I was in Walmart. I had a heaviness in my chest. I didn't want to look at anybody. I just felt this really anxiousness, and if someone were to speak to me, I'd probably lose it. And I knew something was not right, that I was anxious about something. I've never had it since. Probably even before, I probably hadn't had it, but something really got me walking through Walmart. I knew something was up. But anyways, we live in an age of anxiety, and you may deal with it. You may know somebody who deals with it. It's like an illness. You can't sleep. You don't laugh anymore. Stress is your constant companion. The reality is there's a lot to worry about, really. Loved ones getting sick, we worry about that. People lose their jobs. Friends get cancer. Families struggle, so we worry, we feel anxious. But the end comes while worrying. It's just a part of life, unfortunately. And it doesn't have to dominate, though. God offers peace in the midst of whatever storm we're going through. He is sovereign, He is present, He is bigger than any problem that we have. Bigger than our problems, and always right on time. We can trust Him, and we can be anxious for nothing. We really can be that way. And so today, as we look at this, we're going to look at dealing with anxiety, and we deal with it, worry perhaps, we will deal with that. And I think it's a perfect timing because, we're starting a new year. Things are going to come, and we're probably going to get anxious about them, and maybe we can deal with them. We cannot be anxious at all, or less anxious as we're giving it to the Lord. Probably if I were to say right now, anybody have moments being anxious about something? We'd probably all put up our hands and say, yes, I've been anxious about things. Absolutely. Those things happen. We just came through Christmas. There may have been anxiousness at Christmas. You got family coming. Sometimes you get a little anxious because of the weird cousin that will be coming, or uncle, or whatever. Or you got to travel, or you're thinking, I've got to get this perfect gift for my kid, or whatever. There's anxiousness that can come up through that. So many different things. Jobs. The whole time that we lived in Ontario, we liked to vacation in Niagara Falls. Actually, somebody said to me, there are other places to visit in Ontario other than Niagara Falls. We didn't care. We loved going to Niagara Falls. But our first times going through, it'll be a great vacation, But then we had to go back through Toronto to get to Oshawa. And if you ever driven in Toronto, I mean, it's like 8 lanes of traffic, and they, maybe 100 or 110, and they do 120, 130, whatever it is. Crazy traffic, and I would get stressed out about that. If there was an accident that caused us to be in a standstill with a baby who's crying and you're stuck in traffic, it is just, oh my goodness, it's so stressful, and you get anxious about it. We learned, you can take a side road and go up and go in another road right into Oshawa and bypass all of that. But it's kind of funny because you can be relaxing in a vacation and just like, oh, this is wonderful. And then you had to go back. You had to go back to work. You had to go back to life. You had to go back to all the stress of school and kids and for me ministry and all that stuff. So you go on vacation, but then you get out of vacation and you need another vacation because you're just, wow, everything's hitting you once again. Anxiousness. We did a study a bit ago on Max Lucado, and it was called Anxious for Nothing, Finding Calm in a Chaotic World. And I want to he describes anxiety as this. He says it's a low-grade fear, it's an edginess, a dread, it's a wind that won't stop howling. It's not so much a storm as it is a certainty that one is coming, always coming for you. With anxiety, we don't always sleep so well. I've had that. We made to laugh so much. You don't see the sun, you only see the clouds that are on the horizon. And some of us, maybe we feel that we're falling, we're failing, and it's just a terrible experience. What if I don't get good enough grades to get into this school? What if I don't get good enough grades to even pass school? What if I don't do well in this job? What if I don't do well, as a pastor of the church? And all these things are out there. What if I don't do well as a parent and my kids turn out to be whatever? Or as kids, you're like, what if my parents don't do well and they turn out weird, whatever. We have these types of things that is just, there's something that just is there in us. And maybe we start running around like we're Chicken Little with our heads, not with our heads cut off, we're running on Chicken Little. It's like the sky is falling, everything is against me. The root word of anxiety would be angst or worry, that we're worried about something. It's this dread that there's something that's going to happen. Do you know that fear and anxiety are not twins? They're cousins, they're related. And fear sees a threat, it's physical. It's real, but anxiety imagines that there's one that is there. We feel fear, and anxiety is the voice that tells you, don't do something. Anxiety is the voice that would say, don't ever go out into the backyard because there could be a rabid raccoon out there frothing, ready to take you out. That's anxiety that gets you going. Fear or a fight or flight seems to kick in for that as well. So anxiety is not fun, and I understand. People struggle with it, and I'm not in any way trying to minimize that at all. Sometimes we need to have medicine to deal with that. God has given people, the brains to be able to create stuff, and these medicines can help. And if that's a serious thing that the doctor gives you, that may be for you. I'm not in any way saying, if you got really bad anxiety, don't take your medicine or whatever. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying anxiety, give it to the Lord. And He may choose to bring healing through that, or He may just choose to heal you and take that away from you. And so just hear me on that. I don't want to minimize anybody who's dealing with anxiety, because I understand it can be really crippling. I do not want to minimize that at all. A research I did recently, we live in an age of anxiety, and the National Institute for Mental Health says that anxiety disorders are now reaching epidemic proportions. This year alone, 50 million, and this was a U.S. one, but 50 million Americans will feel the effects of a panic attack. Your chest will tighten. You'll start feeling dizzy, maybe a little lightheaded, like you're drifting. You'll have this fear of being out in crowds and avoiding people, and it won't, it's just there. And what's most disturbing is that it is becoming rampant in our young people. And so this year, I'm taking a course on how to understand mental health for young people, and mental health for older people. And I'm going to learn to try to help in whatever way that I can help. I've signed up for a beta program for the youth group that in March, I think it is, that I'm actually able to start helping to teach some things to the youth group and trying to help them with mental health. And so it's just blowing up, I think. It really is. The average high school student today has the same level of anxiety as the average psychiatric patient. And that's huge. In the 1950s, think about it. Our kids today have more opportunities than we did 30 years ago or 50 years ago. They have more education, they've got more toys, they've got more gadgets, they've got more clothes, they've got more than ever, but they're nervous wrecks, and they're tied up, and all of us, really, we're tied up in knots over things, and it's just really, really weird. Most Canadians don't live under the constant threat of attack, in our country, but we're pretty sure the disaster is waiting around the corner for us. So my question is, what's the cause of an anxiety epidemic? What's it about, or a particular way of life that's killing our calm and composure? And they say it's the rapid social change, is what experts say. Things are moving so quickly, they're changing, and it's just, this is what's causing these things. I mean, if you look at what we have now with the internet, we have access to things that we didn't have access to before. Remember before, if you wanted to know someone's phone number, you go to the phone book and find them and call everyone that has that last name and whatever to try to find their phone number. Now we just Google it. We Google everything. Everything is right there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're constantly in touch. We used to go to bed at night and TV stations would stop, I think at midnight, and they didn't come on to 6:30 the next morning. So you didn't have that constant, it's there. Now you can look at CNN or CBC on your phone any time of the day and get all of that. And they don't, give you all the positive stories and a few negative stories. It seems to be all negative, negative, negative. The world's falling apart. This person killed this person. This person's thinking about doing this, whatever. All these theories and all this stuff, and it's just there. So no wonder we're anxious people. They're anxious. It's not healthy. So right now in this room, as we already put up our hands, we know, there's something that's probably getting us anxious. We have someone that maybe is facing cancer. They're feeling foreclosure on a house or something, or their finances are in bad shape, or they're going through relational problems. Divorce could be looming or has loomed, and there's all these types of things that are the legitimate reasons for anxiety. But how do we deal with these as a Christian? And so I hope that this will unpack this, and this will be helpful to us today. With God's help, we can practically win the war on worry. And I want to look at a guy, I call him Dr. Paul. He's not really a doctor. I just call him because he's kind of like, he takes out his prescription pad and he writes us a prescription for anxiety. So basically in the year 61 AD, and he wants to tell us how we can deal with things. 61 AD, he wrote Philippians 4, 6 through 8. And it'll be on the screen here when we look at this today, but this is what he says. I want to read the scripture together. It says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and mind minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. We probably have heard this many times. I've said it different times, this part. When we think, well, that's cool. I remember that. I see that. But I want maybe for us today to take this passage and read it for the next 21 days. Read it every day. Get that ingrained into your memory and download it into your heart and see how things go for you. Are you as anxious after you're reading this and now something comes in and you start to get anxious, but now you're committing to this to memory and you're going over this and you're committing it to God? I'd like to see us over 21 days how we feel, how we're feeling. If you look at them, they contain 4 commands that lead to one powerful promise: the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, and will guard our hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. Could you use some calm in your life right now? Could you? So, I want to use the acronym CALM here today, and I want to look at some things that we will do for this. We want to use the word, and we want to do kind of an acronym, and we'll do this. God is not leading you to in a life of perpetual anxiety. That's not God's will for us. God's will is not for us to be so worked up about something that we can't function, we can't sleep, we can't do life, we can't do anything. That's not God's will for you. It absolutely is not. God does not want you to do it. God made us for more in life than soul-splitting worry and angst. God, and I believe God has a new chapter for us this year, and He's ready to write it, is that He wants us to live in the fullness of what He wants for us. So we're going to unpack Philippians 4 today, and we're going to work it into the soil of our heart and mind and see what God will grow there. Because God's Word is a weapon. The Bible tells us God's Word is sharper than a two-edged sword. And so He's going to teach us, I believe, some things. So he says, Philippians 4, it says, the first thing you have to acknowledge, control belongs to God. Control belongs to God. I'm going on a boat ride, and it is rough. We are rocking back and forth. If I was a baby, it might have been okay. I like being rocked, but it was going like this too. When we were slamming, every time we came down, I could hear it hitting the water, and I'm just like, whoa. We try to walk. We look like Captain Jack Sparrow. If you ever watched Pirates of the Caribbean, we're walking like this. I can't control that. I can't do anything about that. So I had to give control to God. That's bedrock belief in God's sovereignty, that we have to win the war on worry. We have to give it over to God because we cannot control it. Secondly, he says you've got to ask Him for help. He says pray about everything. Give God your requests. He has the power to move mountains. And then he says leave your worries with Him. Leave them there with Him. Maybe when we pray, we actually make a trade with God and we say, God, I'm giving you all my worries. And in exchange, God says, I'm going to give you my peace. You give me all of your worries, God says, and I'm going to give you my peace. And that is an amazing thing. This is important. It's a mental battle because we get things going on in our mind and it's like, oh, this is crazy. And then it gets into our souls and it's just not good. So Paul says, whatever is true, noble, right, pure, excellent, lovely, praiseworthy, whatever translation, that's the stuff. Don't go to bed reading all the negative blogs out there on political stuff or on social media on this person is against this person or whatever it is. Don't feed on that stuff. Feed on things that are pure. We have to monitor our minds. What are we taking in? What are we looking at? What are we reading? What are we digesting? I've had to, and I've said this before, I've had to to actually turn off what I see people posting on Facebook, because they were just so negative and just hammering stuff. And it's like, you can get caught up in that. You can be like, well, I'm getting like that too. It's like, I don't want that. So I've had to turn that off so I don't see it. Because I don't want that being feeding into me. We need to take every thought captive that is not good and make it obedient to Christ. You know, the devil wants to put things into our minds and just let it grow, get it in there and grow. And we just got to say, you know what? No, God, control belongs to you. Ask Him for help. And we need to meditate on the things that Paul talks about. Meditate on them. Paul's ancient prescription for a modern age of anxiety is that we will just, give control to Him, ask Him for help. I wish I had a magic wand that I could wave over everybody and say, your anxiety's gone. I wish I had it in my own life that I could say, no, I want to wave the wand, anxiety is gone. I have it no more. But it's not that simple. God's healing may include, like I said, medication or therapy, or just, for you to getting out and getting into nature and just praising God in whatever is going on. It's a serious thing, and we need to give it over to God. And maybe, you're someone who's just like, no, I've got no anxiety at all. I'm pretty chill until a situation comes along. I'm sometimes situational anxiety. Whenever I go into a boat, if it's the least bit rough, I'm almost laying down in the center of the boat. If I could get into it, I would. I'm just there. And other times, I can be out on a boat, and if it's calm, I'm like, okay, this isn't bad. But a little bit of roughness, I'm like, I'm down. Situational. We need to say, you know what, Lord, my life is in your hands. Be anxious for nothing. I don't want to be anxious about this. Please take this away, and God will do it. I am standing here today to be able to say, going on that boat ride, the longest boat ride I've ever taken, I had absolutely no bit of anxiety because I gave it to God beforehand. I'm like, God, I'm preaching on this. I can't stand up here and say, well, this is what you need to do, and I've never done it. I have to be able to say, this is what you need to do, what I did, and it worked. I gave it to God, and it was like rough, yes, but it was a good ferry ride. And I just kept giving it to Him. I want the peace of God that surpasses all understanding. I want to ask you this today. How would you complete this sentence? I feel anxiety about, and you can fill in the blank. How would you complete that today? What currently, right now, is causing you the most anxiety? Just be honest. You don't have to tell me, but just think about it. In Paul's prescription, he says, be anxious for nothing. Zip, zilch, nothing. Be anxious for it. He could have wrote, be anxious only about the big stuff. He could have. He could have said, be anxious only if the doctor calls but doesn't leave a message. Be anxious for, if you're going off into college, be anxious only for the junior year, because that's when the college application process begins and your grades really count, or of high school. Paul could be saying all of this stuff, but he didn't. He never said that. He said, I want you to be anxious about nothing. Nothing. And that's hard. I think it'd be nice to be an apostle in the Bible. They didn't have watches back then. They didn't have cell phones back then. They were just hanging out. And it makes a difference to you to know that when Paul wrote these 4 words, he was anxious for nothing. He was old man, bent over probably, looking out the window of a gloomy prison cell. Think about it. He's over 60 years old, 30 years as a Christian or so, and he's suffering. He looks out of a prison cell, and you see, maybe spider web of scars from the whippings that he has endured. He's been beaten and stoned and left for dead. He's been deserted by his friends. He's been shipwrecked 3 times. There's been storms and starvations, and he's tired. He's looking out his window, and maybe he's half blind at this point. We don't know. He's awaiting trial before Nero, the Roman emperor, the same Nero who discovered that if you want to be popular with people, you kill Christians. And Paul's the most famous Christian, so understand that when Paul writes this, he's in prison. He's not writing it in the comfort of the Ritz Hotel. His future looks bleak and gloomy, and yet you read the words that he left behind for us, to be anxious for nothing. And that, to me, puts it in a context. He said, listen, pray about these things. Think on these things. His letter to the Philippians doesn't contain an ounce of complaint. Not one word of worry. The whole book, 4 chapters long, and Paul's ode to joy is joyful. He never wrings his hands or shakes his fists at God. Rather, he raises his hands and he thanks God. He actually opens this letter. He says, rejoice in the Lord always. I'll say it again, rejoice. The Lord is near. Paul's prescription for peace from a prison cell begins with a command to rejoice in the Lord while he's in prison. It's amazing. How is that possible? Because Paul discovered a secret while he's in the cell. The Apostle Paul had a bedrock belief in the sovereignty of God. And sovereignty is a biblical term to use how God is in complete control of every element of the universe. If you look in the middle of the word sovereignty, you'll see the word reign, right? And when a king reigns or rules from his throne, that's sovereignty, and God is sovereign. Can you say God is in complete control of your life right now? Can you say that? Maybe that's something we want to pray for this year. That God will be in complete control of my life. And I would have no anxiety from that. Everything is going according to His plan. And Paul, man, he doesn't know what's going to happen, but he says, you know what? Rejoice in the Lord. Rejoice in the Lord. Even when things go wrong, they're going to turn out right because of the sovereignty of God. It may not be the right way in our thinking, but in God's thinking, in His way as things planned, it's going to turn out right. Maybe Paul's looking at his handcuffs, and he's thinking, how is this going to turn out right? But he looks through his life through the lens of God's sovereignty. He says, okay, I'm going to use this season in jail to give me a chance to tell this soldier that I'm shackled to about Jesus. Paul was actually chained to the palace guard. He's got a captive audience, and instead of complaining about things, he says, I'm going to talk to this guy because he can't get away. I'm going to talk to him. It's not about the absence of conflict. It's about the presence of Christ in the conflict you might be in. It's looking at whatever situation that's causing you to have anxiety and worry and say, you know, you have a deep sigh of relief that God is in complete control. Even when life seems to be out of control, God's in control. And I know it's easier said than done, but really, as we give it over to God and keep giving it over, He will take that and give us His peace. Paul writes in Philippians 2, he says, it's God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill His purpose. You know that God has a perfect purpose for our lives? It's going to happen. It's not up to us. God has a perfect will for our lives. And it doesn't matter what's going on. It's not going to stop it. If we have prison, health crisis, bankruptcy, it's not going to stop it. God has a will for us. We need to give God praise. So we're going to look at that over the next couple of weeks. How can we be anxious about nothing? So I hope this is encouraging to you. And if anything, anything that you learn from any of this today is that God is in control, and we're going to give control to Him. I understand why I drive most of the time, because I want control. I can control what's going to happen. When I'm driving with somebody who's not as experienced of a driver as I am, you're like, and I had those moments in my trip. But you know what? As I just give control, it's like, God, like she's driving. And I prayed lots on this trip. Never saw one moose. Everyone told me, oh, you're going to see moose. Someone told me a couple of days before, a trucker seen 17 moose from Port aux Basques all the way down to St. John's. Never saw one moose. Had some typical, an RDF day of rain, drizzle, and fog. But that's it. No snow, no nothing. Giving it over to God. I can be in control only so much. I have to give it all to Him. So I hope this is something that is helpful to you. And what will this look like for us? Well, maybe this year we'll have less anxiety than we had the year before. I don't know. Maybe for you, you might just get to the end of 2025 and you may be like, this was a better year for me because I didn't feel as anxious. I don't know. I just know that Paul is giving this, that we need to give control over to God. We need to rejoice in the Lord always. We need to think on things that are pure, lovely, admirable, praiseworthy, all that stuff. Get out of being so addicted to things that are not healthy for us. I watch shows on TV, series. I love crime, drama, like police shows. I love that because I love to see how they, sometimes, it's fiction, but how the police officer works to solve a crime. And I love it when they get the bad guy. I love that type of stuff. But if it's not healthy, I don't want to be dwelling on any of that stuff. I want to be thinking on things that are going to help me to grow and be a better person and be less anxious. Because honestly, hair loss is a sign that I have been anxious too much. I'm just kidding. Let me pray for you.